The pine wreath on the Ashford family's front door scratched against my knuckles as I knocked, its artificial scent mixing with the December cold that bit through my jacket. I'd arrived 30 minutes early to Claudia's parents' Christmas gathering, a mistake that would change everything. "Holden, you're early," Margaret Ashford said, opening the door with that practiced smile she'd perfected over 20 years of looking down on me. "Claudia's upstairs changing. Why don't you wait in the living room?" The Ashford colonial mansion always made me feel like I was wearing the wrong clothes, driving the wrong car, living the wrong life. Persian rugs worth more than my annual salary covered hardwood floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers. I'd married above my station, and Margaret never let me forget it. I headed toward the living room but stopped when I heard voices from the adjoining study. The door was cracked open, and through it, I could see Claudia pacing near the fireplace, her hands gesturing animatedly as she spoke to her parents. "Can't keep hiding it much longer," Claudia was saying, her voice carrying that excited tremor I hadn't heard in months. "I'm 12 weeks along." My blood froze. 12 weeks pregnant? We'd barely touched each other in the last 3 months. Our marriage had been cold, distant, but I'd assumed it was work stress. "Oh, darling," Margaret's voice rose with genuine joy, more excitement than she'd shown about anything involving me in years. "Richard, we're going to be grandparents again." "That's wonderful news," Richard Ashford's deep voice boomed. "Does Holden know?" The silence stretched long enough for me to count 3 heartbeats before Claudia spoke again. "The baby isn't Holden's." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the doorframe, the cold metal of the handle biting into my palm. "What do you mean?" Margaret's voice had dropped to a whisper. "It's Derek's, my boss at the dealership. It just happened. During that business trip to Chicago last month. Holden was working late every night on that tech support project, and Derek and we connected. Derek Morrison, the golden boy who owned Morrison Luxury Motors, where Claudia worked as sales manager. 45 years old, divorced, driving a different sports car every week. Everything I wasn't. "Claudia, this is serious," Richard said. "What are you going to do about Holden?" "I'll tell him after the holidays. Let him have one last Christmas before his world falls apart. Derek and I have been talking about making this official. He wants to be involved with the baby." My legs felt weak. 22 years of marriage, and she was discussing my replacement like a business transaction. "Well," Margaret said, her voice brightening, "Derek is certainly more suitable. His family has real money, real connections. You could do much better than—" I couldn't listen to another word. Moving carefully, I backed away from the door and slipped through the mudroom toward the side exit. The cold handle turned silently, and I stepped into the December evening. Snow was beginning to fall, fat flakes that melted against my burning cheeks. I sat in my 10-year-old Honda Civic for 5 minutes, watching the warm light spill from the Ashford windows, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. My phone buzzed. A text from Claudia. "Where are you? Mom says you were here." I typed back, "Emergency at work. Sorry. Tell everyone I said Merry Christmas." Instead of driving home, I headed across town to Mickey's boxing gym. Mickey Santos had been my trainer back in college when I'd actually been good at something. The gym was open late, as always, filled with the smell of sweat and leather and the sound of gloves hitting heavy bags. "Holden?" Mickey looked up from wrapping a young fighter's hands. "What brings you here on Christmas Eve?" "Need to hit something," I said. Mickey studied my face and nodded. "Gloves are in the usual spot." For the next hour, I pounded the heavy bag until my shoulders screamed and my knuckles bled through the wraps. Each punch carried the weight of 22 years of marriage, of feeling like I was never good enough, of being the husband who worked late while his wife found comfort in another man's arms. When I finally stopped, Mickey handed me a towel. "Feel better?" "No," I said, "but I feel clearer." "Good. Clear thinking beats angry thinking every time." I drove home through the snowfall, my mind already working. Claudia's car wasn't in the driveway, still at her parents', probably celebrating her new future with Derek Morrison. In our bedroom, I found what I was looking for in her jewelry box. A second phone, small and silver, hidden beneath her grandmother's pearls. I powered it on and scrolled through the messages. Derek. Can't wait to tell everyone about us after the holidays. You're going to love the house I'm looking at. Claudia. Holden suspects nothing. He's so buried in work he barely notices I exist. Derek. Perfect. My lawyer says the divorce will be clean if he doesn't contest. Claudia. He won't. He's too weak to fight for anything. I set the phone back exactly where I'd found it and went downstairs to my home office. If Claudia thought I was too weak to fight, she was about to learn how wrong she could be. I opened my laptop and began making notes. 12 weeks pregnant. Business trip to Chicago. I remembered that trip, remembered working late every night on the Morrison account while she was supposedly in meetings. The timeline was tight, but it could work. My phone rang. Claudia. Hey, where did you go? Everyone was asking about you. Sorry, I said, keeping my voice steady. Johnson called with a server emergency, you know how it is. On Christmas Eve? That's awful. Are you okay? You sound strange. Just tired, long day. How was dinner? Fine. Mom made her usual comments about your job, but Dad told her to stop. Oh, and I have some news when I get home. Good news. Can't wait to hear it, I said. After she hung up, I sat in the darkness of my office, snow tapping against the windows like tiny fingers. Claudia thought she had everything planned out, the pregnancy reveal, the divorce, the new life with Derek Morrison. She thought I'd roll over and disappear quietly. She was wrong. Claudia came home at midnight, her cheeks flushed from wine and winter air. She found me in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and pretending to read technical manuals. You're up late, she said, hanging her coat in the closet. Couldn't sleep. How was the party? She settled into the chair across from me, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married 22 years ago, before the promotions and the expensive tastes and the growing distance between us. Holden, I need to tell you something important. Here it comes, I thought, but not the whole truth. Not yet. I'm pregnant. I set down my coffee cup carefully, arranging my features into what I hoped looked like shock. Pregnant? Are you sure? 12 weeks. I wanted to be certain before I told you. 12 weeks. 3 months of knowing and saying nothing. 3 months of planning her exit strategy. Wow. That's incredible news. I reached across the table and took her hand. Her wedding ring felt loose on her finger. I can't believe we're going to have another baby. She squeezed my hand, and for just a moment, guilt flickered across her face. I know we haven't been close lately, but maybe this is exactly what we need. A fresh start. Maybe it is, I said. She went upstairs to shower, and I returned to my laptop. If Claudia wanted to play games, I'd play, but I'd play to win. The next morning, I called my attorney's office and left a message for Patricia Chen, the toughest divorce lawyer in the state, according to online reviews. Her assistant called back within an hour. Ms. Chen can see you Tuesday at 10 a.m. She says to bring any relevant financial documents and a timeline of events. Tuesday morning, I sat in Patricia Chen's downtown office, watching snow fall past floor-to-ceiling windows. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and an expensive suit that suggested she was very good at her job. Tell me everything, she said. I laid out the timeline, the overheard conversation, the hidden phone, the business trip dates, the 12-week pregnancy announcement. Patricia took notes in precise handwriting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. You're certain the conception time frame aligns with this Chicago trip? Positive. I have the travel receipts, hotel records, everything. She was gone for 5 days. I was home working on a project for Morrison's dealership. Ironic considering. And you haven't confronted her about the affair? No. She thinks I don't know. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Good. That gives us advantages. First, we need medical records to confirm conception dates. Second, we establish a paper trail of her relationship with Morrison. Third, we document any financial improprieties, if she's been using marital assets to support this relationship. What about the baby? Paternity testing can be done as early as 9 weeks through a simple blood test. If Morrison is the father, that changes everything. Child support, custody arrangements, even potential alienation of affection claims. Alienation of affection? It's still actionable in this state. If we can prove Morrison knowingly interfered with your marriage, he could be liable for damages, especially given the power dynamic, boss and employee. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. How long do we have? Time is on our side. The longer she maintains this deception, the stronger our case becomes. Document everything. Save every text, every late night, every lie. When we're ready to move, we want overwhelming evidence. I spent the next 3 weeks playing the role of excited, expectant father. I bought pregnancy books, scheduled doctor's appointments, even started looking at baby furniture online. Claudia seemed relieved by my enthusiasm, and the guilt in her eyes faded as she convinced herself that her deception was kindness. Meanwhile, I documented everything. I installed tracking software on our shared computer, photographed her hidden phone messages, and kept detailed records of her schedule. Derek Morrison was a frequent presence in her life, lunch meetings that ran long, evening client events, weekend training sessions. The medical records arrived on a Thursday. Patricia's office had subpoenaed them as part of a routine marital asset review, a perfectly legal fishing expedition. The conception date was clear, December 15th, plus or minus 3 days. Claudia had been in Chicago from December 12th through 16th. We have her, Patricia said during our Friday meeting. The timeline is ironclad. Now we need Morrison's cooperation for paternity testing. He won't volunteer for that. He won't have a choice. We'll file a motion requiring genetic testing before the birth. It's standard procedure in contested paternity cases. Contested? But I haven't contested anything yet. Patricia smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. You're about to. That weekend, I watched Claudia arrange baby clothes she'd bought during a shopping trip with her mother. She held up tiny outfits, her face glowing with happiness that felt like a knife in my chest. What do you think of this one? She asked, showing me a blue onesie with Daddy's Little Champion printed across the front. Perfect, I said. Sunday evening, she was upstairs when Derek Morrison called our house phone. I answered on the second ring. Oh, he said, clearly not expecting me. Is Claudia available? She's in the shower. Can I take a message? A pause. Just tell her Derek called. About the, quarterly reports. On Sunday evening? It's urgent. I'm sure it is. I'll let her know. After I hung up, I sat staring at the phone. Derek Morrison had a voice like a radio announcer. Smooth, confident, used to getting what he wanted. In 3 months, he'd expected to have my wife, my unborn child, and my life. He was going to be disappointed. January brought bitter cold and the beginning of the end. Claudia's pregnancy was showing now, a small but noticeable curve that she touched unconsciously throughout the day. She'd started wearing looser clothes and had that radiant glow everyone talks about. To anyone watching, we looked like a happy couple expecting their first child. The illusion was perfect, which made what came next even more devastating. Patricia Chen called me at work on a Tuesday morning. The court approved our motion. Morrison has 30 days to submit to genetic testing, or we'll get a default judgment establishing non-paternity on your part. What does that mean exactly? It means if he refuses, the court assumes the child isn't yours, which opens the door for everything else: divorce proceedings, asset protection, the alienation claim. He's trapped. That evening, I found Claudia in our bedroom, talking quietly on her hidden phone. She didn't see me in the doorway. "Can't just ignore it, Derek. It's a court order. If you don't take the test, everyone will know." No, Holden still doesn't suspect anything. He's been amazing, actually. Really supportive and excited about the baby. I backed away and went downstairs to wait. 20 minutes later, she joined me in the living room, her face carefully composed. "Everything okay?" I asked. "You seemed upset." "Just work stress. Derek's dealing with some legal issues with the dealership. Nothing serious." "Anything I can help with? I know a little about business law." "No, it's fine. He has lawyers." The next few days were tense. Claudia jumped every time the phone rang and spent hours texting on her hidden phone. Derek Morrison, according to my research, was scrambling to find legal representation. His usual corporate lawyers had referred him to a family practice, which had referred him to a specialist in paternity law. He was starting to understand the scope of his problem. On Friday, Claudia came home from work, pale and shaken. She went straight to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of wine before remembering she was pregnant and dumping it down the sink. "Bad day?" I asked. "Derek's wife filed for divorce." I looked up from my laptop with what I hoped was appropriate surprise. "Elena Morrison? I thought they were happy." "Apparently not. She hired some shark lawyer and froze all their accounts. Derek's a mess." "That's terrible. What happened?" Claudia hesitated. "She found out about someone, an affair." "Wow. Do you know who?" "No," she said quickly. "Some woman from work, I think." I nodded sympathetically. These things have a way of coming out. Secrets are hard to keep. That weekend, I drove past Morrison Luxury Motors and saw Derek's red Porsche in the parking lot, even though the dealership was closed. Through the showroom windows, I could see him pacing back and forth, phone pressed to his ear. Even from a distance, his body language screamed panic. Sunday morning, Claudia was quiet during breakfast. She picked at her eggs and kept checking her phone. "You seem distracted," I said. "I'm fine. Just thinking about the baby, about everything that's changing." "Change can be good. Sometimes it helps you see what really matters." She looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I thought she might tell me the truth. Instead, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." It was the last time either of us would say those words and mean them. Monday morning brought the phone call I'd been expecting. Patricia Chen's voice was crisp and professional. "Morrison took the test. Results will be available in 72 hours. And then? Then we move to phase 2. I hope you're ready for this, Holden. Once we start, there's no going back." I looked out my office window at the gray January sky. "I've been ready for weeks." "Good, because your wife and her boyfriend are about to learn that actions have consequences." That evening, I cooked Claudia's favorite dinner, chicken marsala with roasted vegetables. She seemed touched by the gesture, and we had the most normal conversation we'd shared in months. She talked about baby names and nursery colors and how excited her parents were about becoming grandparents. "Mom wants to throw a baby shower," she said. "Something elegant, maybe at the country club." "That sounds nice. Will Derek be there?" She nearly choked on her wine. "Derek? Why would Derek be at a baby shower?" "I just thought, since you work together and he's been so supportive during your pregnancy." "Supportive? All those late meetings, the weekend training sessions. He's really invested in your success." Claudia's face went carefully blank. "He's just a good boss. I'm sure he is." Wednesday afternoon, Patricia Chen called with the results. Derek Morrison was the biological father of Claudia's unborn child. The paternity test showed a 99.7% probability which was as close to certainty as science could provide. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we serve papers, all of them, simultaneously. Your wife Morrison, even your in-laws if they were complicit in the deception. We hit them all at once, before they can coordinate a response." "When?" "Friday evening. I suggest somewhere public with witnesses. Make it memorable." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. I know the perfect place. Friday evening, the Ashford family was hosting their monthly dinner party, a tradition that went back 20 years, featuring the same group of wealthy friends and neighbors who formed the core of their social circle. Claudia had been excited about it all week, talking about how she wanted to announce the pregnancy officially to everyone. She got her wish, just not the way she'd planned. I arrived at the Ashford house at 7 p.m. sharp, carrying a bottle of expensive wine and wearing my best suit. Claudia met me at the door, radiant in a black maternity dress that showed off her growing belly. "You look beautiful," I said, and meant it. Even knowing what I knew, she was still the woman I'd fallen in love with. "Thank you. I'm nervous about tonight." "Don't be. Everything's going to be perfect." The living room was filled with familiar faces, the Hendersons, the Clarks, the Williamses, all the people who'd been polite to me for 20 years while never quite accepting me as one of them. They were Claudia's people, her parents' people, old money and older connections. Margaret Ashford was holding court near the fireplace, regaling everyone with stories about her upcoming grandchild. Richard stood beside her with a brandy, looking prouder than I'd seen him in years. "There's the father," someone called out as I entered. "Congratulations, Holden." I smiled and accepted the handshakes and backslaps, playing my part perfectly. Claudia stayed close to my side, her hand resting on her belly in that unconscious gesture pregnant women make. At 7:30, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, moving toward the foyer before anyone could object. Patricia Chen stood on the front steps, flanked by 2 process servers and carrying a leather briefcase. She was dressed for court, all business and sharp edges. "Good evening, Mr. Foster. Are they all here?" "Everyone except Morrison. He's being served at his home. Shall we proceed?" I led them into the living room, where conversation died as people noticed the strangers in suits. Claudia looked puzzled, then alarmed as she recognized the official nature of the visit. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia said, her voice carrying easily through the sudden silence. "I'm Patricia Chen, representing Mr. Holden Foster in a matter of family law. I have documents to serve." She nodded to the first process server, who approached Claudia with a manila envelope. "Claudia Foster, you are hereby served with a petition for divorce and an order for genetic testing of your unborn child." Claudia's face went white. She looked at the envelope like it might bite her, then at me with dawning horror. "Holden, what is this?" "It's the truth," I said quietly. The second process server approached Margaret and Richard Ashford. "Margaret Ashford, Richard Ashford, you are hereby served with a subpoena to testify in the matter of Foster versus Foster, regarding your knowledge of adultery and conspiracy to defraud." Margaret actually staggered, grabbing her husband's arm for support. "This is outrageous! How dare you come into our home?" "The court dares, Mrs. Ashford," Patricia said calmly, "as does Mr. Foster, who has been systematically deceived by your daughter and her lover." The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. Questions, exclamations, demands for explanation. Through it all, Claudia stood frozen, the divorce papers clutched in her trembling hands. "Holden," she whispered, "please, not like this." "Like what?" I asked. "Publicly? With witnesses? The way you and Derek plan to humiliate me?" "Derek?" Margaret's voice rose above the chaos. "What does Derek Morrison have to do with this?" Patricia opened her briefcase and removed a folder. "Derek Morrison is the biological father of Mrs. Foster's unborn child, as confirmed by court-ordered genetic testing. He and Mrs. Foster have been conducting an affair for approximately 4 months, during which time she has been deceiving her husband about the pregnancy. The silence that followed was absolute. 20 people staring at Claudia, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the Persian rug. The genetic test results are conclusive, Patricia continued. Mr. Morrison has also been served with papers establishing paternity and child support obligations. Additionally, both Mrs. Foster and Mr. Morrison are being sued for alienation of affection, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Richard Ashford found his voice first. Claudia, is this true? She looked around the room at all the faces, friends, neighbors, people she'd known her entire life, and I saw the exact moment she realized her carefully constructed world was crumbling. She started, then stopped. Tears began streaming down her cheeks. It's true, I said, answering for her. Your daughter has been planning to leave me for Derek Morrison since before Christmas. She was going to wait until after the holidays to tell me, let me have one last Christmas before destroying my life. How thoughtful. Margaret was shaking her head. No, this is impossible. Claudia would never. I have recordings, I said. Phone calls, text messages, everything. Would you like to hear them? Holden, please, Claudia whispered. Don't do this. Do what? Tell the truth? Isn't that what you should have done 3 months ago? She had no answer for that. Patricia handed me a final envelope. The financial records you requested. I opened it and scanned the contents. Bank statements, credit card bills, hotel receipts. Everything Derek Morrison had paid for during their affair, all of it documented and itemized. 5-star hotels in Chicago, I read aloud. Expensive dinners, jewelry, a weekend getaway to Napa Valley, all charged to Morrison's business accounts, while my wife was supposedly on company training. Quite an education she was getting. Someone in the crowd gasped. I couldn't tell who. The total comes to just over $30,000, I continued. Money spent on my wife while I was home working late, trying to support our marriage. Money that will now be considered marital assets, subject to division in the divorce. Claudia was sobbing openly now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. Margaret tried to comfort her, but Claudia pulled away. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry. Sorry you got caught? I asked. Or sorry you did it? She couldn't answer. I looked around the room at all the shocked faces, these people who'd never quite accepted me but who would never forget this moment. 22 years, I said. 22 years of marriage, of trying to be good enough for your daughter, for this family, for all of you. And in the end, I wasn't the problem. I handed the financial documents back to Patricia and headed for the door. Holden, wait! Claudia called after me. We need to talk. I stopped and turned back to her. We'll talk through lawyers. That's how you wanted it, remember? You just thought you'd control the timing. The last thing I heard as I left was Margaret Ashford's voice, high and desperate. How could you do this to us, Claudia? How could you destroy everything? Outside, snow was falling again, thick and heavy. I sat in my car for a moment, watching the flakes accumulate on the windshield, and realized I felt lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. I smiled and typed back, yes, it is. Then I drove home through the whiteout, leaving the wreckage of my old life behind. The next 3 weeks moved like an avalanche, slow at first, then faster and more destructive than anyone could have anticipated. The story of the dinner party spread through town like wildfire, growing more dramatic with each telling. By Monday morning, everyone knew about Claudia's affair, Derek's paternity, and the spectacular public confrontation at the Ashford house. Derek Morrison tried to salvage his reputation by claiming he'd been seduced, that Claudia had pursued him relentlessly while portraying herself as unhappily married. It might have worked, except Patricia Chen had obtained copies of his text messages through the discovery process. Meet me at the usual place, Can't wait to get you out of that marriage. Wasn't exactly the message of an unwilling participant. Morrison Luxury Motors Board of Directors held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Derek as CEO, citing conduct detrimental to the company's reputation and values. His ex-wife, Elena, got half of everything in their divorce, including his stake in the dealership. Within a month, he'd gone from wealthy businessman to unemployed scandal subject. Claudia fared no better. The luxury car industry was smaller and more gossipy than people realized, and word of her affair with her boss made her unemployable at any reputable dealership. She moved back in with her parents, who were dealing with their own social exile, as former friends distanced themselves from the family drama. Margaret Ashford, who'd built her identity around being the perfect hostess and social butterfly, found herself uninvited to events she'd attended for decades. The shame of having raised a daughter who'd conducted such a public affair was too much for their social circle to overlook. I, meanwhile, became something of a folk hero. The story of the wronged husband who'd orchestrated the perfect revenge resonated with people, especially men who'd felt powerless in their own relationships. I received job offers, dinner invitations, and more than a few phone numbers from recently divorced women. "You've become famous," Patricia Chen told me during our final meeting. "There's a reporter from the Herald who wants to interview you about modern marriage and accountability." "I'll pass," I said. "I just want to move on." The divorce was finalized in record time. Claudia didn't contest anything. She couldn't, given the evidence. I kept the house, the cars, and most of our savings. She got visitation rights to see our daughter Jessica, who was away at college and mortified by the whole situation. "Dad," Jessica had said during one of our phone calls, "I can't believe Mom did this to you. To us." "Your mother made some bad choices," I told her, "but she's still your mother. Don't let this poison your relationship with her. You're being way too nice about this." "Maybe, but anger is exhausting, and I'm tired of being angry." The baby was born in June, a healthy boy that Derek Morrison would be supporting financially for the next 18 years. Claudia named him James, after her grandfather. I sent flowers to the hospital but didn't visit. That chapter of my life was closed. I sold the house in August and moved to a smaller place across town, near Mickey's gym. I'd started training again, not for competition, but for the peace it brought me. There's something clarifying about physical exhaustion, about reducing life to the simple act of throwing punches at a heavy bag. "You look good," Mickey told me one evening as I was wrapping up my workout. "Lighter somehow." "I feel lighter." "Good. Carrying other people's lies will break your back eventually." One evening in September, I was leaving the gym when I saw a familiar figure across the parking lot. Derek Morrison, looking older and more worn than I remembered, was getting out of a beat-up Honda Civic, a far cry from the luxury cars he used to drive. He saw me at the same moment and froze. For a long moment, we stared at each other across the asphalt. Then he walked over. "Holden." "Derek." Up close, he looked terrible. His expensive suits had been replaced by off-the-rack clothing, and his perfectly styled hair was showing gray at the temples. "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for everything. What we did to you was wrong." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-pity. All I saw was exhaustion. "Apology accepted," I said. He seemed surprised. "Just like that?" "Just like that. I'm not carrying this anymore, Derek. What you and Claudia did was terrible, but it's over now. We all have to live with the consequences." "I lost everything," he said quietly. "You made choices. This is where they led." He nodded slowly. "How do you do it? How do you just let it go?" "I didn't let it go," I said. "I made sure everyone knew the truth, and then I moved on. There's a difference." Derek looked like he wanted to say more, but I was already walking toward my car. I had dinner plans with a woman named Sarah who taught high school English and laughed at my jokes and didn't know or care about my ex-wife's scandal. As I drove away, I saw Derek in my rearview mirror, standing alone in the parking lot. He looked like a man who'd finally understood the true cost of his choices. 3 months later, I heard through the local gossip network that Derek had moved to another state, taking a job selling used cars at a small lot in Ohio. Claudia was working part-time at a department store while living with her parents and raising baby James. Margaret and Richard Ashford had sold their colonial mansion and moved to a retirement community in Florida, unable to face the continued social ostracism. I felt no satisfaction in their misfortune, no vindictive pleasure in their downfall. The anger that had driven me through the divorce proceedings had burned itself out, leaving behind something cleaner and more peaceful. On a cold December evening, exactly 1 year after I'd overheard Claudia's confession at her parents' house, I was walking downtown when I saw her coming out of a coffee shop. She was pushing a stroller, bundled up against the cold, looking tired but not unhappy. She saw me at the same moment and stopped. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other, two people who'd shared 22 years of marriage and now shared nothing but history. "Hello, Holden." "Hello, Claudia. How are you?" "I'm okay. Getting by." She gestured toward the stroller. "James is walking now, getting into everything." "That's good. Kids should be curious." An awkward pause settled between us. "I heard you're seeing someone," she said. "I am. Sarah. She's a teacher." "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy." "So do you." She smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. "I'm working on it. Therapy helps. Understanding why I made the choices I made." "Good for you." "Holden, I know this is probably too little, too late, but I really am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for all of it. You deserved better." I considered her words. This woman who'd been my partner for more than half my adult life. "We both deserved better," I said finally. "But we can't change what happened. We can only decide what comes next." She nodded. "What comes next for you?" "Happiness," I said. "Finally." As I walked away, I heard her call my name one last time. "Holden, thank you." "For what?" "For not destroying me completely." "You could have, but you didn't." I looked back at her, standing there with her baby in the December cold, and felt something that might have been forgiveness. "Everyone deserves a chance to start over," I said. Then I continued down the street, toward the restaurant where Sarah was waiting, toward the life I was building from the ashes of the old one. Behind me, snow began to fall, covering the sidewalk in a clean white blanket that made everything look new again. The room had gone white when they realized the truth, but from that whiteness, something better had emerged. Sometimes you have to let everything fall apart before you can build something worth keeping.